by the quest, England's finest.
There's only one subject really worth talking about today, and even though everyone else has done it, there's not much point commenting on news if you wait until it's not news anymore. Still, I'm going to do what I like to do, is just to try and take a step back and look at what's going on a little bit more objectively, with a bit more distance, and look at what's underlying it all. So let's get into that. So as I'm sure we all know by now, what happened was that a white, mentally retarded to some extent kid was kidnapped by a gang of black kids, was tortured and otherwise treated horribly over 48 hours, and then released. And the whole thing was idiotically streamed to Facebook, because why wouldn't you stream your crimes to Facebook, I suppose? These kids have been arrested, the victim was found and assisted and everything. Name's not been released. Part of the problem here is that very few actual details have been released, but everyone can watch the video and draw their own conclusions from that. You can find it yourself. I found it pretty disturbing. I can't be asked to put it here. There's plenty of other places you can see it. So the crime itself is still kind of up in the air, because it's just the way things are. Things aren't necessarily as you see them, even if they're live broadcast. You can't know precisely what's going on for at least a few days after it's happened. But we can talk about the reactions, and we can talk about some of the underlying ideas and themes, and we can talk about hate crime, whether it should even be a thing, whether that makes sense. So let's do that. Much as it pains me to admit it, many of the right-wing pundits do have some good points about what's gone on here. They point to the increasing militancy of the black community as a problem, and it may well be. Blaming Black Lives Matter is going a bit too far, but the kind of explosive rhetoric and the black supremacy movement that nestles within Black Lives Matter can certainly have, well, not exactly blame, but blame for the overall atmosphere. I mean, you only need to look at the reactions of people like Ghazi, Black Hit, how they're excusing what's happened, to see that there is a problem there. This isn't, of course, to say that means that anyone's right to protest or right to free speech should be curtailed any more than a Dylan Roof suggests that conservative or even alternative right pundits should be silenced, whatever. And the only thing that should be silenced is direct calls for violence, and we have seen those coming from both sides, and those should be condemned. That doesn't appear to be happening particularly strongly in this case. There has been a lot of excuse making from people like Ghazi for what's going on, trying to place it in its proper historical context. Well, the proper historical context is, of course, that we live today in the modern age when there is no slavery, at least not of the kind that they're talking about, and nobody alive today held any slaves. Nobody alive today is to blame for anything that happened. So why would you have people who've never been slaves attacking people who've never been slaveholders for things that their great-great-great-grandparents might have done? And considering the amount of actual slave owners was fairly low, that seems fairly implausible. So, there's problems there. There are problems with breeding this victim ideology, victim narrative, and the blame culture, the idea of white supremacy that is endemic. But these kids, I doubt they're college kids. We don't know that much about them, at least not from any properly confirmed sources. So I doubt they've been exposed to that university academic culture of self-loathing whiteness or whatever. So that can't be it. I think they're just shits, sadistic little shits. We've all known people like that. Usually it doesn't lead to much of anything, but sometimes it does. And they've used language and excuses to let them get away with being evil, horrible little shits. But what's dangerous here is really the people making the excuses. That's probably more damaging than the crime itself. And equally, the reticence of people to call it what it is. To say that, this is obviously a racially motivated or excused hate crime. And yet, as I'm given to understand that it's actually being prosecuted as one now, which is good, and makes a nonsense of the idea that black people can't be racist, at least in terms of legality. So that's something. But there was a lot of dithering and argument over whether this was a hate crime. I mean, obviously it was a hate crime. They're on camera saying that this is why they're doing it. Because he's white, because he was something, fuck Trump or whatever. That's not excusable any more than violence from the white right wing is. It's all stupid, pointless bullshit. But what's dangerous is this excuse making and this unwillingness to say what it is, because that is what is fueling the hard right reaction to what has happened. That's what's increasing the temperature and turning it up. They have a point when they say, well, this is obviously a hate crime. Why are you excusing it? Why are you pretending that it's not somehow? They have a real point there. There is a double standard, even if it has finally been decided that it will be prosecuted as a hate crime. And all the excuse making gives them fodder to point at, to look at, these people hate whites, and that will just feed into identity politics, which people seem fine with when it's black kids becoming horrible and militant, but not fine with when it's right-wing skinheads or whatever. Shouldn't be right or okay in either instance. So that's where I think the problem is. Less so the crime itself, horrible as it is, but the people making capital out of it, the reactions to it, the excuses for it, the dithering, the unwillingness to treat people equitably. And that's what brings us on to hate crimes. So should there even be such a thing as a hate crime? Is someone more dead because you killed them because they're black or white or Jewish? Or are they just as dead? Does it make the murder worse somehow? Does increasing the sentence for hate crimes act as any more of a deterrent? I mean, does that mean that we're okay with people killing each other for other reasons, relatively speaking? I object, Your Honor. I didn't kill him because he was black. I killed him for money. Oh, well, that's okay then. You can have a reduced sentence. It doesn't. Does that make any sense? I guess I'm asking questions here, but from my point of view, what the hell is a love crime? Stalking, maybe. It just doesn't make any sense. If these things are crimes anyway, then they should be treated equally. Whatever the motivation, something terrible that we would punish has still happened. But then we find ourselves, because of this, prosecuting relatively minor things, meaningless, relatively, things, as if they're much more serious. I mean, someone got I can't remember how long the sentence was, but a fairly harsh, considering, sentence for throwing bacon at a mosque. Would he have got the same sentence if it was halal lamb that he'd thrown at the mosque? Effectively that's the same thing, I guess, littering and vandalism or something, but because it offends those particular religious sensibilities, he gets more time. That's dangerously close to blasphemy law. The principle of equality is that you treat people the same, but when you create all these hate crime categories, you are creating privilege for these groups. You're saying that if someone attacks you, we will treat them more harshly than if they attacked somebody else. That's not fair, that's not equitable. If we're going to punish on that basis more harshly, then maybe we're not punishing harshly enough in the other instances, or vice versa. It just doesn't make any logical and consistent sense, if your aim is equality, to create these privileged, protected groups. If the point is to act as a deterrent, well, you want people not to commit these crimes anyway for any reason. So why isn't that the same sentence regardless? Is it really going to make anyone think twice about what they're doing? Probably not. is there any evidence that hate crime legislation has actually impacted in any meaningful way on the incidences of these crimes? Probably not. I don't know. I'd be interested in seeing if anyone has any data on that. But it just, to me, it just doesn't make logical, consistent sense, and it goes against the principle of equality and equal treatment before the law. And ironically, it's an example of privilege for minority groups. Worth thinking about, I think. It's always worth taking a step back and thinking about what lies beneath what's going on, rather than reacting with pure emotion. Zang.